Who's going to be the one managing the
I think he's going to public speaking will be.
just because we'll have to let people in so as they come into Zoom. Oh, you see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like all right, yeah, no, that's what yeah.
Yeah.
This screen's closed. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Oregon Active Transportation Summit, Move into Action. This session is the role of community-based first, last mile shuttles in Washington County with Rachel Hakala, Fran Zadaran, Reza Fahudi, and John Whitman.
Thank you all for coming down here to Pella from across the mall. We today want to share with you a case study about Washington County and Ride Connections partnership on a shuttle program and the role that serves in the community. Today we'll do some quick introductions and then we'll talk about planning with Washington County, operations for the shuttle service with Ride Connection. I'll talk about the service analysis that WSP recently did, and then we'll have some audience questions at the end and we'll wrap up. So we just had some introductions, but here's everyone's names again on the screen. We also wanted to get a sense of who's here in the audience today. So could you raise your hand if anyone here lives, works, or visits Washington County? Has anyone ridden a Ride Connection transit service? Has anyone ridden a Ride Connection? Okay. Well, welcome everyone today. We're going to have a few trivia questions interspersed throughout our presentation, and we have some fun prizes.
There's some flag for you all. Got some water. Branded bags. And high visibility yellow too. So
yeah.
All right, let's do it.
So when we ask the question, if you can just raise your hand and then we'll call on whoever raises first. See if we can get it right.
All right. So once again, I'm Reza Fahudi from Washington County. Thank you all for joining us. Really excited to share this project with you. First question. So you are aware that the MAX is closed, obviously, for the next few weeks because the Better Red project. You probably have seen the construction in the Gateway area for the new flyover ramp. But did you know that they're expanding it out to Washington County as well? So there'll be a total of 10 new stations in Washington County with Red Line service. So there'll be more connections, better service. Who can name the station as far west as it'll go to? And Kate, you can't answer because you're non-TriMet staff. Who can tell me the furthest west station that the Better Red project will go to? Raise your hand and I'll call. April? But more specifically, which station?
Oh.
What's good next?
Is it fair?
Yes, fair complex. Great job. You get your choice. Do you want a drawstring bag or a canvas bag? All right, off to a great start. There'll be more. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Washington County. For those who are not familiar, we are the county just to the west of Portland in the metro region. So we have about 600,000 residents, and about a third of them are in the unincorporated urban area. And so fun fact, if it was an actual city, it'd be the second largest city by population in Oregon. A total of 38% are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and 20% are at the 200% poverty line or below. And then a total of 6% lack vehicle access. So there are definitely some pockets of need in Washington County. Certainly it's not spread evenly throughout, but there are areas where we know there's a lot of demand for better transit service. And then we also have a sizable employee population as well. We have 285,000 employees, and 2/5 of them make under $40,000 per year. So a lot of low wage jobs as well. So just to give you a bit of a transit picture in Washington County, can you see this map okay? So we have this, the urban area is in the blue, and that's the area that's served by TriMet primarily. And then we also have the Smart District just to the south there in the orange. And so everything else you see here, everything in green is the rural area, and that's been, for the most part, primarily served by the interregional services, by the adjacent counties and by the state of Oregon. So this kind of gives you a picture of what that network looks like. So you have Tillamook County, you have Yamhill County, you have the state of Oregon Point Service, and a couple others as well that come into the TriMet district, and they provide those connections interregionally. So to talk about why first last mile shuttles, just want to give you a sense of what the fixed route network has looked like in Washington County in the urban area. So you can see MAX is this bold red line, and then the blue lines are fixed route bus to varying degrees of frequency. And then the yellow is the peak only service. And then you have the west and black as well in the southeast portion of the county. So you can see that there are some gaps in the urban area where we do not have good service. And so I'll just highlight a few. Forest Grove, there really isn't anything beyond just what's on line 57 on TV Highway. North Hillsborough, we have a lot of jobs, a lot of industrial jobs are out there that don't have good service. And then same issue in Tualatin as well, a lot of industrial jobs and some communities out in Tualatin as well that don't have good service. So the impetus was, we had cities, we had local employers, they were looking to increase access for people who are living and working in these underserved areas, to just create better connections for them. And then I want to highlight the missing rural connections as well. So up here, you can see Banks and North Plains just outside the urban area. And those areas are really lacking good service into the urbanized area where TriMet serves. And so those are the connections that we're looking to fill. So the shuttles, they began as a grassroots-led effort, and they succeeded initially. This is the network that we've been having for the last 5 or 6 years. It's been pretty constant up to this point, but with a few changes. But you can see Grove Link in the Forest Grove and Cornelius area. We have North Hillsborough Link up in North Hillsborough Industrial District. And then we also have the Tualatin shuttle down there to the right. We also have the Westlink Rural and Interregional shuttle. So it's this maroon line up there serving Banks and North Plains. So we contract, Washington County, we contract with Ride Connection to provide this service for us. They're a private nonprofit transit provider, and they help leverage the available federal and state resources to provide services to older adults and people with disabilities. They also manage the Medicaid transportation network for the region. And what's really special about Ride Connection is that they're a fare-free model. So it doesn't cost to ride any of their services in Washington County or in your entire network, right? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to pass it to John, who's going to talk a bit more about the origin of Ride Connection and give more of a picture of the operation side of things. But let's do some trivia next. Trying to see, that's a good one here. Okay, so this weekend is supposed to be really nice weather, maybe in the 80s. Let's say you want to go out for a nice vacation to, or mini vacation to the coast. You want to go to Cannon Beach. If you're trying to leave from Portland, what would be the transit provider that you would take to get there the fastest? Hand there back. Yes, absolutely. You like to? Right, John.
All right.
You Reza?
Again, my name is John Whitman. I work for Ride Connection. I have since I think about 2019, and I'm the service planning supervisor for the organization. I'm going to cover some of the history of Ride Connection, but just a show of hands. How many folks in the crowd are familiar with Ride Connection and what we do? That's pretty good. There's a lot of transportation professionals. Oftentimes it's one or two hands, and maybe that person happened to use Ride Connection, which is great. So this is good. I'm still going to give some more history and context, though. We were founded in 1988, so about 35 years old, and we emerged out of a TriMet Citizens Advisory Group that was looking at the transportation needs of older adults and people with disabilities, specifically, and how to address those needs. Remember, this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. Predates the mandate for ADA paratransit. So there were many gaps in the network to support some of our highest need residents in getting around the Portland metro area. Since then, we expanded. We formed as a private 501c3 nonprofit, and there are many advantages to that. It allows us to be eligible for a number of different grant sources, eligible to receive contributions from like private foundations or even individuals. We're also able to maintain a volunteer program, and for a lot of the first years of our existence, we were entirely volunteer supported. I think our first year, we provided 11,000 trips, all of them with volunteers. Since then, we have expanded. Prior to the pandemic, we did 550,000 trips. And that was with a combination of volunteers, paid staff drivers, and then our partner organizations as well. It's not just Ride Connection providing these trips. It's also our partners, Clackamas County, a lot of community-based organizations, Metropolitan Family Services, Impact Northwest, Central Cultural, Asian Health and Services Center. Looking at the network of partners, I think better demonstrates our impact on the community. We are funded through a number of different funding sources. I already mentioned the benefits of being a nonprofit, but we also do receive funding from the Federal Transit Administration, ODOT through the Special Transportation Fund program, and that has since merged with the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, which we'll be talking even more about later. And then we receive funds through TriMet, who's also a valued partner. What we are best known for providing in the community, what our partners are best known for, is providing demand responsive transportation, operating, I would say, similarly to TriMet Lyft or other ADA paratransit services. These programs are, for the most part, eligible to older adults and people with disabilities who call ahead and they can schedule a trip. It might even be from their door to any number of community destinations. It could be a medical appointment. It could be an important life-sustaining medical appointment like dialysis or chemotherapy. It could be a shopping trip or a trip to a meal site or a food bank, or it could just be a visit to see families or friends or go to a park or other place to recreate in the outdoors. We do a number of group shopping shuttles for older adults and people with disabilities, rideabouts in North and Northeast Portland, East Portland, and other areas of the metro area. Then there's the first last mile shuttles. We'll go into a lot more detail. I think Reza's already shown the routes on those. But the way those operate, it's a deviated fixed route model. So it's able to deviate half a mile off the route for most parts. In many cases, picking people up from their door to use public transportation. In fact, we've seen folks who had to rely on ADA paratransit or other demand response be able to use these shuttles, which is very powerful. And finally, we do rural transportation in rural Washington County. But it goes far beyond those directly operated transportation options. We also operate a number of mobility management programs. We have a one-stop transportation referral center operated out of our headquarters, where folks experience barriers to transportation can call in and receive guidance and referrals for accessing the transportation program that best meets their needs. We also train older adults and people with disabilities how to use the fixed route network, most often the TriMet fixed route bus and the MAX. These are older adults who might have called in for a transportation assessment and really demonstrate the capacity to use the fixed route network and a desire to use it too. It's a lot more freeing to be able to use scheduled public transportation rather than have to call several days in advance for a ride that you may or may not get. And finally, we offer fare relief in partnership with TriMet and other public transit providers. Our philosophy or approach is we want to steer people towards the options that are not just at lowest cost to our organization or the taxpayer, but also perhaps give them the most freedom of mobility throughout the community. I touched on those partnerships. So we partner with a number of community-based organizations to provide transportation. We're also involved and help to manage the Medicaid transportation brokerage for the region in partnership with Care Oregon and a few others. That's thousands of trips per day, even. When I joined Ride Connection 4 years ago, it was a 90-person organization. After we took on that contract, our organization swelled to, I think, like 200 staff members. It's a lot busier these days. I'll go into a little more detail on the history of the community connectors. Our first one was Westlink. That started in 2009 after years of this rural transportation need having been identified. So this is the service that connects Forest Grove to Banks, to North Plains, and then to Hillsborough. And it's mainly serving people who are in need of that reverse commute option, getting from the MAX to the bus stop to a job in the rural area. However, it does meet the needs of rural residents as well. Next came GroveLink. That was really a city of Forest Grove led effort. And what we found early on with these transit services is they really needed like a local transit champion to step up and really be a voice for the need for the service and a good advocate for it. And so we found that in the city. They launched a planning effort in 2012, 2013, and secured the funds through the Jobs Access Reverse Commute Program, or JARC, not too long after that. And we began operating the service in 2013, 2014. Tualatin Shuttle was already operating before Ride Connection took it on in 2014. It was one of the several shuttles in the region operated by the Chamber of Commerce that kept people from a transit center to various employers in that suburban context that otherwise would have required an employee to walk several miles to get to work. We took that on from the Chamber of Commerce after they found that long-term operations weren't sustainable, and have operated it ever since and actually expanded it this past January to provide a connection from Bridgeport all the way up to Stafford Road. And finally, there's the North Hillsborough Link. And this is our highest ridership shuttle and really the catalyst for this partnership with Washington County. It was a need identified by the Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce. They saw employers like Wells Fargo, Research Finds Foods, Amazon, and others coming in, but there was no public transportation serving these job sites. And at least then, it wasn't really a possibility for TriMet to come in. Probably not enough ridership to justify fixed route bus service at that point. So again, that was funded through JARC early on, but that wasn't deemed to be a long-term sustainable funding source. In fact, that funding soon went away. Luckily, as that happened, House Bill 2017 was passed, Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. It became a valuable revenue source. And Washington County really saw this need to promote first last mile options, suburban transportation options, and public transit in the county. I'll go quickly through the program goals. It's really providing these flexible transportation options in the community to support quality of life, community health, public health outcomes, and local economies. We provide access to jobs, healthcare, shopping, social services, recreation, other destinations, and really focus on providing mobility options for people with no access to a vehicle, or maybe they no longer have the ability to drive themselves. We see as our core populations, older adults and people with disabilities, but also now students, low-income people, commuters, and other transit users, especially on these shuttles. And finally, we try the best we can to coordinate with other transit providers to promote use of the regional and interregional transportation systems, recognizing that a ride connection trip might be just one part of a longer intermodal trip. In terms of our rider characteristics, 30% of riders on our community connector shuttles are actually high school or college students. And we mainly see these folks in Forest Grove, students getting around the community, maybe outside of their school bus trip, and also college students, because Forest Grove is a college town. 63% of riders across our network are commuters or job seekers, and that's not necessarily surprising, given that a lot of these shuttles form to support the needs of employers and their employees. 40% identify as low income, and then 46% identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. These are, like I said before, intermodal trips. Virtually no one we found taking a community connector trip is driving themselves as part of their trip. We found that 57% walk or roll as part of their trip, 13% bike, and an overwhelming majority, 70% of riders use TriMet or another transit provider as part of their overall trip with the community connector shuttles. In terms of how people find out about this service, they were formed in a grassroots way, and they're often promoted in that way as well. 18% of riders heard about the shuttle through their employer. Only 17% so far have found it out through like trip planning on an app. We do have the GTFS data built for integration with Google Maps, and yet that's not one of the primary ways that people are finding out about the community connectors. In fact, the most popular or a way of finding out about it is just through word of mouth, people hearing about it throughout the community, maybe even just seeing a ride connection bus or hearing about it from a TriMet driver who happens to know about our services. And I want to just cover a few customer stories, typical customers using our community connectors. You'll see Dave on the right. Dave is an older adult, and he has emphysema. So mobility for many years now has been an issue for him. Previously, he had to rely on paratransit or other paid transit service, and it wasn't flexible enough to meet his needs. And also the fare on public transportation was a barrier for him. However, he happened to see a GroveLink bus a few blocks from his house one day, called Ride Connection to find out more about the shuttle, and he was eligible for it, and learned that it could deviate to his door. He would no longer have to walk to the bus stop, which was a huge barrier to him using public transportation. He now uses the GroveLink shuttle almost every day that it's operating, 4 to 5 times a week, to get to the coffee shop, to catch up with friends, or to get to Safeway to do his grocery shopping. We have Dimitri. He's one of the high school students who uses the GroveLink shuttle. Him and his friends use it to get around town all the hours that they're not in school or taking the school bus. And they really appreciate, and their parents really appreciate, that these community connectors are a safe way for their children to start using public transportation. They feel that the drivers are keeping an eye on them, that there's a really strong community presence on the shuttles, and that promotes a sense of safety and overall vibrancy as well. And finally, there's the many commuters who use our service. We've heard from so many people that they previously had to walk a mile or two after taking a 40-minute or hour-long max ride to get to work, which was especially bad in inclement weather. And now they have a transportation option to get them to the door of their employer. Looking ahead, as we put more shuttle service out in Washington County, as we began our partnership with Washington County, we're finding that there's more community need out there than we're currently meeting. Especially as we come out of the pandemic, people are starting to use public transportation again and starting to need it in different ways or ways that we didn't see before. Looking at COVID-19 ridership, we did take a significant dip, just like any other public transportation provider. And we have started to see recovery. You can see that on the gray line. Still not nearly where we were pre-pandemic, but we're on our way. For instance, on North Hillsborough Link, a lot of the employers we're serving, it's manufacturing jobs. Those jobs can't become remote. It's a need that's going to continue to be out there and grow. We never had to suspend service during the COVID-19 pandemic. And luckily, due to the labor shortage, we certainly experienced those impacts, but never had to cut service because of that. We recognized early on that the community connectors were a way that essential workers were getting to their job sites. We're focusing more and more on equity and accessibility. Looking ahead as we look at other shuttle areas, but how to refine and improve the current ones. We're looking at how we could better serve BIPOC communities, how we could better serve the needs of commuters, especially since so many 9-to-5 jobs that transit was currently serving are remote. That's a real opportunity to shift our focus and the wider transit network's focus to these other needs that weren't being served before. And then accessibility to, I think Reza will speak more to this, but we're working on a project to promote accessibility at our various bus stops. Thinking about program innovation too, we have demand response and we have deviated fixed route, but that's not able to serve all the need as flexibly and as cost effectively necessarily as we could. So we're looking at modes like microtransit, vanpool, and others, especially as technology improves. And we've seen some exciting pilots up in Washington State. And then finally, looking at stable funding for operations. Ride Connection's a nonprofit. We're not like a transit agency in that we don't have a tax base. We don't have fare box revenue. Our services are fare free. So stability has always been a question and concern for our services. With demand response, if funding goes away, you have to turn down more rides, which is devastating on the one hand, but it doesn't fundamentally change the service delivery model. Whereas with fixed route or deviated fixed route bus service, you lose funding, you have to cut service, you have to change the route, you have to limit frequency of the service. So we never wanted to be in that position. And luckily with the statewide Transportation Improvement Fund and our partnership with Washington County, we have long-term stability and growth opportunities for our shuttle systems. So I'm going to hand it back to Reza, and he'll go into more detail about these exciting changes and opportunities in Washington County. Thanks, John. Oh, but first, more trivia.
Let's do it. All right.
Oh, that's exactly what I know what's happening. Could have been a lot worse.
Okay. So if you were trying to get to the region's only Topgolf, which Ride Connection shuttle would you take to get there? Anybody know? Yes, sir. Yes. Great. All right. So, like John has alluded to, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, or STIF, was really a game changer in terms of stabilizing the program and making sure we had a sustainable operations going forward. So established in HB 2017 with the employee payroll tax, so a 1/10% of your paychecks goes towards funding first last mile shuttles. For that, we thank you very much. So again, game changer, the new funding source for public transportation operations that we never had before in the state. And so the goal of the SIF program is to primarily improve service to people, low-income populations and students, and also reduce fragmentation between different service providers. So if you're trying to connect from one transit agency or another, making sure that those transfers are better coordinated and easier to complete. It also rolled in the Legacy Special Transportation Fund for older adults and persons with disabilities that got rolled into the STIF as well. So as part of this, Washington County officially became a public transportation service provider for everything outside of the TriMet and SMART transit districts. So with that, we're able to get the following pots of funding. The formula funds that are generated in the rural area, so the employee payroll tax that's generated outside the TriMet and SMART districts, and that goes to rural service only. There's also competitive grants, discretionary intercommunity grants that can go towards various projects and programs, and we'll talk about a couple of those coming up. And there's also separate funding that's available from TriMet, and this is really what's helped sustain and in the future enhance the first last mile shuttle program in the urban part of Washington County. So just a brief overview of the SIF process. So the county, we convened our own transit committee. It's made up of transit riders, social service agencies, business interests, cultural organizations, and the rural cities of Washington County to recommend local priorities for inclusion into what's called our transit development plan. We are required by the state to complete that every 2 years. And then that is then folded into TriMet's Tri-County Public Transportation Improvement Plan. And so our rural and urban first last mile shuttle goals and programs and projects get folded into that larger plan. And then once ODOT approves that TriMet plan, they then disperse payments to TriMet and the county to help fund our transit programs. So just to give you a taste of what's coming up in terms of transit, first last mile shuttles and how we're going to sustain and grow the program. So the biggest thing absolutely is to maintain what we have already, to not lose that service. But then we want to also add new service. We want to add service hours. We want to increase the frequency and span. We want to add new weekend service, which is really important for a lot of the riders or potential prospective customers in Ride Connections service area to have that weekend service. And then we're also continuously working with other agencies like Tillamook County, like Yamhill County to reduce fragmentation, to increase coordination and cooperation between our services. We're also going to be expanding coverage into 2 new areas in Washington County. So one is in the King City area, so connecting King City to Bridgeport Village along Durham Road. And then the other one will be connecting PCC Rock Creek to Sunset Transit Center through the Bethany area. And then we're just ongoing promoting the service through public outreach and engagement, making sure people are aware of the services. That's pretty much the number one impediment towards getting higher ridership, is that people don't know about the service. And so how can we grow it and make sure that the community, potential customers are aware of it. So this is one of the projects that we're looking at for with the STIF discretionary grant to improve access and safety needs. So this is the typical condition that you might see along the North Hills Rural Link if you're trying to get the top off. So some of the deficiencies that we have here. So there's no signage pretty much anywhere along the route. So you have really no idea if you're a first-time customer or if you're just a prospective customer where you might go to pick up the shuttle. And there's obviously no schedule information available at these stops. A lot of these stops lack accessibility. So you can see on a street like this, there's no concrete landing pad. So if you're trying to use the wheelchair lift, there's no kind of stable, safe place for it to drop so that you can get on or off with a wheelchair. And then there's a lot of locations elsewhere in the system that there's parked cars, there's car parking, and the bus cannot access the curb to be able to drop the wheelchair ramp. And then inadequate amenities, so something simple like benches or shelters or lighting or trash cans or bike racks, any sort of thing is really lacking at most of Ride Connection stops. And then at the stops where we do have that, so there's North Plains and Banks has a couple of shelters. Forest Grove has a few. There's maintenance concerns. There's a lack of responsibility in terms of who's supposed to maintain them. And so trash is piled up. There's been vandalizing, and it contributes to the it contributes to, I think, how people might feel about the service just at a glance if they see a shelter that's not well maintained, it's not kept clean. And all these just contribute to a lack of community awareness. People don't know that there's a shuttle bus that stops here. They're not going to know about it. They're not going to have any reason or want to ride it. So how are we going to improve access to safety? Well, we're going to do pretty much all the things that I said we're missing. So we're going to add shelters and benches and lighting and landing pads where necessary. We're going to have shuttle stop signs, there's going to be schedule information. And then where we're putting in these new infrastructure, we're going to have a plan for maintenance. We're going to make sure that the cities are aware of who's responsible for maintaining them so that they can be kept clean and in good working order. And then our transit development plan, which I mentioned a bit earlier, is also identifying access to transit needs, so sidewalks, bike lanes, crossings that are gaps. And so we're working on a plan to address those as well moving forward as additional funding comes in. So another discretionary grant that we've received funding for is to help fund technology upgrades in the Ride Connection system. So a couple of things that they're going to be doing. They're going to make some back-end software improvements to help improve the scheduling and dispatch of vehicles and generally contribute to on-time performance. Ride Connection will also be implementing real-time arrivals so that customers know they can check their phone, or if they want to plan a trip in Google or using GTFS, they'll be able to see when the next vehicle is coming. And they've also installed security cameras as well on their vehicles. So as we look to the future for first-class mobility, what's on the horizon? So we have collaborated with TriMet on their still draft, but nearing towards final Forward Together service plan. So we're looking to create a cohesive transit system in Washington County, and we've been working closely with them on this. So there's a possibility that several of Ride Connections routes might in the future graduate to fixed route bus as the ridership matures, and we want to be in close coordination with TriMet when that happens, so that we can then potentially reallocate that shuttle funding to new areas that currently lack service. So we don't want to duplicate funding. There might also be a few situations where there's currently fixed route bus today, but it might make more sense in the future to go to the community connector deviated fixed route model. So we're going to be looking at that as well. And then finally, we're going to be evaluating new service models that could be deployed in lower density urban or rural areas. So one of the grants, discretionary grants that we've gone out for this year that we don't know if we've won yet, but it's looking pretty good. We're seeking a grant to assess the viability for microtransit, assess the viability for microtransit in Washington County. So this is kind of a new service model that's been done in other parts of the country. And Clark County has, C-Tran has a pilot going on right now, but this would be new for the Portland region. And what microtransit pretty much is it operates like a ride-hailing service. So you use a smartphone app to you use it to book a ride and to get a service, curb-to-curb service within a given service area. So it makes a lot of sense in parts of the urban and rural area that can help fix gaps in the system and help complement the fixed route network. So I'm going to pass it to Rachel to talk more about the future of the first last mile shuttles, but I think we'll do another quick trivia because can't get enough. So Portland is not the only city where we've seen some fresh Elmo. Which intersection in Washington County was the first red lane ETC business access transit pilot location? Can anyone name the intersection where we have a red lane? April probably knows, but who else? Does anyone have any idea where that might be? Sure. Yes. Great job.
Right. So as part of this whole process, WSP, Ken and I were contacted to help with identifying where future shuttle routes should be placed to best serve the community and the transportation needs. So as part of that, we looked at microtransit case studies around.
Can you find WSP? I keep seeing it listed everywhere, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's a consulting firm that does engineering and other things. I don't know if it has it, what it stands for.
Formerly
It's just, yeah.
Williams Sale Partnership was the original person that started.
That should be a trivia question.
So as part of our best practices research, we looked at several microtransit services around the country, including C-Tran over in Vancouver, Washington. They have the Current, as Reza mentioned. Looked at in Denver, RTD, FlexRide, Sacramento's service, and UTA in the Salt Lake City area. So these are all microtransit services. We looked at why they chose to go to a microtransit model, which is the more on-demand, like a ride sharing, but a shuttle. Why they chose to do it, what they're getting out of it. So these are some of the key factors that we found in our survey, and then brought these back to why Washington County and Ride Connection might want to pursue this in the future. Key factors there. And then we also looked at shuttle bus practices just overall. So the more traditional service, as well as the microtransit. These were all the 6 agencies we looked at. Some of them don't have microtransit, some of them just have traditional shuttle. And our key takeaways, we looked at their core objectives in their shuttle service. So are they looking for like serving the whole region or certain neighborhoods or areas or certain types of service? We looked at their characteristics where they choose to locate the shuttles, based on location, population characteristics. Maybe they're trying to serve certain equity populations, and we asked about how they analyze equity in their services to make sure that their services are equitable. We looked at the density targets. So as was mentioned earlier, there's a certain level where it doesn't make sense to operate a full fixed route bus like a TriMet service. So you want to go to more of a shuttle system. And we looked at ridership, and as I mentioned, the microtransit. So in this study for Washington County, we were looking at these 3 main buckets: maintaining the current and committed service, enhancing existing service. So which of the services that were talked about could be improved, like time of day, weekend service. And then the main thing that I'll talk about today is where to provide new coverage. So we analyze the region and where we might want to add new shuttles in the future. So as part of that, these were kind of the main steps in the shuttle system analysis. We looked at criteria, areas that are lacking existing bus service from TriMet or Ride Connection, or just any services. Some areas don't have anything right now. Areas where there's a demonstrated need for public transportation based on the community characteristics. And these go together into the map shown, the shuttle system opportunity analysis zones. All of that light red color were the areas we were really focused in on. From there, we developed investment priorities for the shuttles and service options for priority areas that were most suited to a shuttle service. And then in the future, seeking increased regional coordination funds. And we're working towards, as part of this, we looked at equity. TriMet has an equity index that's shown here. The orange is where the Washington County key equity areas are. So we overlaid that with the previous map to see where the equity areas and the areas needing service overlap. Those were the highest priorities in our analysis. And then some of the other factors we looked at in deciding where to locate shuttles were, for serving those community connector opportunity areas, the light pink in the map. Again here, avoiding duplicating planned services, so Ride Connection and TriMet and all the other services in the area. We want to connect with them strategically and not duplicate service that's already there. Providing access to key destinations and having trip generators on both ends of the service are good ways to have a successful service. And then trying to serve the target populations and job and population mix of uses and densities that I talked about from our best practices analysis. Trying to line up all of those things so that 10 numbers shown here, the 10 routes we initially came up with that serve these areas and all of those factors. And then we did a more in-depth evaluation of these key factors. This is just a sampling of them here. There was a lot more that went into it, but these are some of the key features under equity and ridership, and the two big categories. We looked at ridership potential, cost effectiveness of these shuttle services, potential funding opportunities that they would have, and again, serving those key populations, and also making sure there's local support. As John talked about, it's important to have local champions and the community wanting this service, that people are going to really use it and benefit from it. And reducing service fragmentation and all the different transit services that are out there. And then again, John talked about how there's a lot more students using the system now, so that's another big factor to prioritize. So after going through that evaluation, we came with these 3 tiers, tier 1 being the highest and most ready or suited to near-term becoming new shuttles. Those are in the green now on the map. Tier 2 is the second level coming up next, and then tier 3 is not quite ready, but maybe in the future. So all of these were prioritized in this way in the Washington County Transit Development Plan and going forward for funding and implementation over the next few years as we help to expand the shuttle system and have more service out there for the communities. So to wrap this all together, we talked about what goes into the shuttle planning and the partnerships between Washington County Ride Connection and all the other regional partners involved in this, and everything that goes into the implementation and serving the communities. Is there anything else either of you want to say to wrap up as we finish here? Or any key takeaways that the audience might be able to use in their relate to their communities?
I'm excited to hear if there's any questions.
Yeah. Well, we want to do a trivia first?
Oh, yeah.
All right. What climate line in Washington County was the first to receive battery electric buses? I'm going to name the line in Washington County that received battery electric buses. Sure.
Okay, the green line.
No, it's a bus, not.
Oh, okay. The 45.
No, sorry. Right. No. Anybody else? 62, line 62 was the first one. Let's ask one more, then we can go to questions. I love it too. So similar to the Cannon Beach question, if you're trying to instead spend a glorious Friday afternoon at the Banks Vernonia Trail, what service would you take from Portland to get there? What would be the fastest way to get to the Banks Vernonia Trailhead Banks from here, from Portland? Yes. Fortunately, we only have the crossing back.
All right, now we can take any questions if there's any. Yeah.
So I was interested by the demographics around the zero car households. I know that people virtually aren't using cars to use these different shuttle services, but do we happen to know how many of the riders just don't have cars in the first place versus people who are choosing to ride the shuttle service?
Yeah, we don't know that for sure. I mean, a lot of them are students who don't yet have a driver's license. Yeah. And then we know anecdotally that many of them do live in zero car households. And in many cases, that's for economic reasons. I know with the Westlink bus in particular, the rural bus, we saw a lot more ridership kind of at the bottom of the recession and the recovery from the recession. I was mainly transporting people who, yes, didn't have a car because they couldn't afford one. We had one person who would take the MAX all the way from Gresham to downtown Hillsborough and then take the Westlink bus to get out to his job in Banks. So that's like a 2-hour trip. The economy recovers and people like that suddenly can afford a car and they're driving again, which we're at an active transportation conference that might not elicit cheers or anything, but a lot of people would see that as a good outcome. There's many different user types, and certainly there are like tech workers, for instance, who use our services as well, getting to Intel or like us. So a lot of different reasons that people are either choosing not to drive or it's not a choice for them. But I think the common theme, yes, is that they're not using a car as part of their trip or commute.
Yeah, and then straight back.
You mentioned microtransit. Does the TDP have any recommendations on potential pilots or recommendations where you guys are considering microtransit?
Yes and no. So as part of the shuttle system analysis, we were trying to decide, because we did that analysis and then we went after the microtransit pilot. So once we got the results of the shuttle system analysis, that did give us some more insight as to where we would want to do the microtransit pilots. So like we're thinking the South Beaverton area might be a good candidate just to help connect folks who live in the Cooper Mountain area, those environs. So I'm not sure if the TDP came out. It might have come out too soon to have that recommendation in there, but it was included as part of our grant application to vote out for the CIF grant. So that is one place we're looking at. And then in the rural area, I think that's more of the question. We're not sure exactly where yet.
Yeah, you mentioned looking at microtransit as a way to serve in the weekends or evening hours where you might be operating a fixed route shuttle or a deviated fixed route shuttle. I was curious, did you find any agencies that are able to do that in your peer review, kind of switch to that microtransit?
I think it helped them to expand their hours more because it's a lot more flexible since it's on demand. The shuttles are serving where people need it. So that did allow them to put more weekend or evening and weekend service in. If we heard some of that, yeah.
Yeah, question. How all did y'all collect or conduct outreach for some of these areas? I know that especially as you're serving rural areas and low density areas, it's really difficult to try and collect feedback. So what were some of the ways that you were able to really hear from the people that you're trying to serve?
When we're designing service in the rural area and preparing for implementation, I mean, the same goes for all ride connection services that I guess at the scale at which we are going to operate, grassroots outreach is the most effective. So when we're going to survey people, it's surveying them through the utility bills in the rural area. Also doing like tabling at farmers markets. There's a thriving farmers market in Forest Grove that attracts a lot of people from the rural area, but also now North Plains, I think Gaston have farmers markets too. Going to senior centers, North Plains has a senior center. Banks, it was much more difficult to find like that place where older adults or low-income folks were accessing vital services. But we did find a church where we could do outreach that was operating as a food pantry. So going to like where potential riders are at. And then I heard this at the opening panel as well, interviewing bus drivers, transit operators. They are, I think, the richest source of information on transit needs in a community. So I love riding on the bus and getting to speak with our riders, but also our drivers for an extended period of time and hearing their take on the situation.
In addition to that, we've tried to seek out major one-off events or like annual events where we might get a good crowd. So National Nights Out is a good one. If anybody has been to the North Plains Garlic Fest, pretty awesome, huge crowd. Not everyone, of course, is from North Plains. They do have a pretty big regional draw, but we've got some good feedback from there too. So it's all about trying to seek out those events.
There was some mention.
Go ahead.
There was some mention about first and last mile and funding from TriMet and some of that sort of thing. Is there also some integration in there and improvements for or possibility of e-bike loan share or some type like that to do the first and last mile?
That sounds like a great idea for an integrated mobility solution, but I have not heard of that specifically. I don't know if anybody else has heard of that, but yeah, well, that would be really nice as a first last mile option, but I don't think that's come up.
I think the West Side Transportation Alliance has a pilot with employers.
We
think you said it was like 60% or a little more that are job seekers, commuters, folks that are using this service for jobs. Other 40%-ish are using it for recreation, using it for personal use. Is that about right?
It could be students getting around town, recreational use. We do have people who use it to get to medical appointments. So the grocery store is a big one too. We get a lot of requests. Hey, or when are you going to serve Walmart or Fred Meyer? So it's a mix of, I think, all those trip types, with commuting being the dominant one.
I guess I was just thinking, this may be a dumb question, but are there any shuttle options that are pet friendly for folks that are trying to be able to use, if they don't have any other means of transportation in their community, want to access support to their community, but have a pet, basically a family member they want to take with them? Are there any pet friendly options for them to be able to?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think we follow the approach that most transit providers would, that, you know, you can board the bus with a pet and a carrier, but that of course doesn't work for your 80-pound dog. So certainly a need that's not currently being met by any transportation service, but just kind of a puzzle of how you would safely and effectively accommodate for that. And we, of course, do follow ADA requirements as well when it comes to service animals.
There's another situation that came up recently where we encountered a family, and Cornelius was trying to find, were they trying to get on the bus? Or
they were coming from Lincoln City, had caught the Tillamook service to Banks, and were trying to get to Cornelius by bus. They were traveling with children under the age of 2 and didn't have car seats, and we couldn't accommodate that. Even if we did have car seats on board our bus, it'd be too much liability for us to take on for like our driver to install that. So we were working with, you know, City of Banks and like the local police department to find an option for this family, and luckily someone finally picked them up. But yeah, unfortunately there are those situations or cases that slip through the cracks or just cannot be served by public transportation.
I was wondering if you spoke about some of the shuttles graduating to TriMet service. Is that the model that you want to try to grow your shuttles so that they become fixed route service?
Yeah, I think the goal should be to help build the market, and if fixed route bus isn't the solution that works today, it might in the future. But if you start running good service there, like North Hillsborough Link is, you know, it's every 30 minutes or even better, I think, some parts of the day, is that right? So when you have a service that's stable, that's reliable, and you're really getting good ridership from it, I certainly see no problem in moving to that direction. Now, the issue is that, you know, this is free, whereas TriMet would cost a fare. So there's some, I'm sure there'll be some friction to making that transition. But yeah, I think that's the way that we should be looking at it. In any of these places where we think in the future there might be demand for service, for fixed route service, but it's not there today. Well, this is a great solution to bring service in at a lower cost, and see if we can help build a market to justify it.
I was really worried about breaking the news to our operations team that North Hillsborough Link made it into Forward Together as a, you know, candidate for in the near term for TriMet service, that they were likely going to absorb our route. And I was just thinking, oh, they're operating such a successful program, or they're going to be really sad it's going to go away. The response I heard is, great, we get to operate elsewhere. Our drivers get bored of driving the same 5-mile stretch over and over again, day in, day out. So I think we're really proud of that, see that as an achievement, that we were able to approve an area for wider transit service and for TriMet service. And now we can focus on another area of significant need.
Is there anybody looking at inner city service? Like there's a lot of traffic between the Sherwood Tualatin area and the Hillsborough and North Hillsborough area, people commuting to work across River Road and Shoalsbury and Shoal Sherwood and most of that area. That gets a lot of traffic across there. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility of transit there. And then also from South Hillsborough to North Hillsborough, there's a connection that it seems like a lot of people are moving there to work in North Hillsborough, and there's no connection across there. per se.
Yeah, so the latter one, that's definitely on the horizon. It should be coming pretty soon. The issue with going from Sherwood or 12th into Hills Road, it's such a long route. It
Yeah.
costs a lot of money to operate. And so it's certainly an idea that's come up a lot in terms of why don't we have service here? Because it seems to make sense. The same thing comes up from like Portland to Cedar Hill on Cornell Road. You have this route that goes through the hills and it's a lot of traffic. Why not put a bus on it? It's just the economics of it haven't worked out to the point where we can do that. But I think we'll still take a look at it in the future and see what we can do.
Hi. I've been thinking a little bit about rural transit options lately, so I'm just curious to hear a little about what is existing with Ride Connection for the rural areas and how some of those future options might help address some issues like large service areas and high costs per ride.
Yeah, I think microtransit's a really interesting one, finding that perfect in between demand response and on the other side of the spectrum, fixed route or even deviated fixed route. I don't know that, we've seen a successful, model elsewhere of like a truly rural microtransit pilot. Well, I guess what we're seeing in C-Trans service area comes fairly close and they've had success. So that's one. I know van pools always come up in conversation. I always haven't figured out how to do it. We have been, for a couple of years now, been trying to implement a rural workforce shuttle that doesn't operate, throughout the day or even through an entire, shift of peak hours, but maybe serves 5 or 6 of the larger nurseries, farms, other, agricultural employers, and getting people with limited or no other transportation options to those sites. So we're hoping we can implement that in the next year. It's been one of the major victims of the operator shortage. We haven't been able to do it. I don't know, Reza, are you aware of any other options the county's looking into or that came up in the transit needs study
For the rural area? Yeah, like you said, it is tough. Tough place to operate. So yeah, I don't have much more to add. We're definitely going to be looking at with the microtransit study and see what we can do and what places might make sense for it.
I think that's our time. Thank you all for coming today and
A big thanks to our presenters today, to our 2023 sponsors. Guide is the place to go to see all our presentations, descriptions, and room assignments. And there's also a printout of the schedule available in March as well.
he was sad. He had a bad relationship with his dad. His dad lived with him. His dad was ill.
You don't get perspective. My parents too. One of my first bosses.
I don't even the outside one day.
You just don't think, oh, I didn't think I'd be able to figure anything out. Okay, I'm gonna get back up on the ladder then.
Hi, everyone. Is everyone ready to start? Yeah. Welcome to the 2023 Oregon Active Transportation Summit, Moving to Action. This hour, we'll have two presentations exploring practical cycle logistics, an overview of B-Life operations with Sprinkling Jones, and reimagining the middle mile, a transformative approach to delivery with Eric Hogard. There will be time for questions at the end of each presentation, as well as extra time at the end.
All right, so let me go over here.
Okay, so I guess downstairs they were giving out pronouns. I'm he, him, Eric Hogard. And I'm going to start off by telling you a story, of course. You know, it's an intimate space here. So when I was a kid, my family went to Florida for vacation. And it was so much fun at the beach. And, you know, if you've been to a beach like this, especially when you were young on the boogie board, and, you know, you go the first run and, you know, things are going smooth, you know, maybe you got a small wave and you're kind of moving along and floating right to the beach. It's just great. And then you go again, and here's another wave, and you're just a little guy, you know, but you're trying to catch that wave because you know that you're supposed to do that, and you kind of do, and it's pushing you along, and then you lose it, and you're turning over, and water's getting in your eyes and in your mouth, and you're gonna die, you know. You just feel this, and you know, it just gravels all around and sand, and you go in, and your belly's kind of red because you kind of rubbed up against the beach. So you kind of pause and think, geez, I almost died. Thank you. I'm going back. Right? And so I want to talk about a wave, and that wave being an autonomous wave. And I want to start off by saying about 5 years ago, there was a lot of hype about autonomous vehicles, and so many people were caught up into it, and DOTs were kind of like, oh, geez, we're not ready for this. And so it's not that, but it is an autonomous wave, and it is a powerful technology that I'm really excited about and I want to tell you about. So my years at ODOT, 30 years, I did a lot of things, surveying, design, construction. And I want to pinpoint surveying because if you think about an autonomous vehicle, it's actually a traveling survey piece of equipment. You know, that's what it is. So there's a lot of crossover. If you work with a DOT, you're working with precise numbers around X, Y, and Z. And you create something like this. And so I had the privilege over time. Now, we didn't start that way. We did a lot of things on paper, but, you know, and there were a few people that could learn CAD, this new thing, when I started. Kind of tells you maybe a little bit about my age, but also that we really moved along and had these wonderful technologies. So that's my background in learning about autonomy. And so I know a bit. However, there's my brother. And so I'm from Michigan, and my brother for decades, he's still doing this, and he's got these clients. He knows, he's ridden in about 100 autonomous vehicles. And so makers of autonomous sensors and systems, and we talk. He's passionate about what he's doing, and I'm passionate about what I'm going to tell you about. And so, but he had a boss that was pretty neat. And I've had good bosses, but nothing like this guy who's just a wonderful man. And so at the same time he was with GM, my brother was working with him in research and development. Part of that was autonomous vehicles. And he worked as an advisor to Waymo, pretty big stuff. And he's the world's leading authority on autonomous electric vehicles used in transportation services, pointing to transformation for moving people and goods. And he wrote the book. That is his book. And so through my brother, I had the privilege of being able to share with him some of my early ideas and different stages and get his input. So I have a background that really is helpful for autonomous vehicles. I'm going to take that quote about autonomy will transform people, the way people and goods move, which I couldn't read that. So, but before autonomy, we've had another revolution, a technological revolution in e-commerce and the internet. And that's happened since 1995, which was, if you know this company, Amazon, they were kind of small. And this concept, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, transit-oriented development, about increasing density and arranging the form of the city to promote walking and biking and transit. And it's related to density. So I'm just shortening that up to say urban density increases transit use. I think that makes sense to a lot of you. However, that whole concept, Peter Calthorpe, who was at the University of Oregon, you know, this is a great concept, but it happened before e-commerce. And so what we have now in our world, it's changed. And we have all these trucks, more and more trucks coming in and clogging up the streets and roads. And they're big and you can't see around them. They're smelly, they're noisy, you know, and we've got so many of them. So what I'm looking at is a different concept that I'm calling transit-oriented development and delivery. And where delivery is in the mix, and that we form the city around the idea that we also need to move goods. And there's some things that happen with this, and you're going to find here that it's pretty interesting and amazing. And I hope you share in the end with the excitement that I have, because urban density radically increases transit use in spite of density when you add delivery into the mix. So I need to explain that. This is the New York Times in 2019. And we have more and more of this. And for those of you who are concerned about packages in, I don't know how much that happens in Portland, but these packages are taking up parking, they're taking up bike lanes, and they don't care. I mean, they're big companies, they just pay the bill if they're doing violations. And so this statement summarizes it, it's just great. It's having a stark impact on gridlock, road safety, and pollution in New York City and in urban areas around the world. And we want to look at doing something different. And I'm here to show you what we can do. There's this term that you may not have heard of, the middle miles. And right now, we have the last mile delivery. So Beeline is doing that sort of delivery called the last mile deliveries. And there's these other autonomous vehicles. That vehicle has traveled, I haven't kept track, but it's over 1 million miles. So it's an interesting thing where, before people were asking, when are we going to get these autonomous vehicles? And the real answer to that is, where are we getting them? We are getting them in these small vehicles. And there's a reason for that. So what's on the horizon are these other autonomous vehicles, and there are a number of them. And there's promise there. But that is the last miles, and I'm talking about reimagining the middle miles. That's this, where we have an increase of trucks in these middle miles. And we have this big problem because when they are on the roads, and it doesn't take a lot of these trucks to cause congestion. And they're an outsized influence on congestion, on safety. And so this is obviously a big concern. When we have congestion, the cars and the trucks and everything in a bumper-to-bumper situation are stopped. But unless there is an electric vehicle, they're all pumping out CO2, toxins, diesel, the whole works. So what I'm saying is we can make a massive shift away from delivery trucks. Now that should be an incredible statement to you, which means you might not believe it. How the heck are you going to do that? And I'll tell you up front, as with anything, it's not going to happen overnight, but we can make progress. Just as when I was with ODOT, I saw how the bike program just developed over time, and it's great stuff. It hasn't gone far enough, of course, but we've made progress. So delivery trucks, can we do this? Here's what I'm proposing. Light rail. And let me explain a little bit more. But this can help us in moving goods. So what you see here in the faint gray, that is a small track. We have light rail and we have ultra light rail. This is an ultra light rail. And where are we? We're at a station platform as if we're waiting for the train. This is shown at night, but I'm going to show you it doesn't have to be at night for this to happen. What are these blue things? Those are loaders, and they're on a rail. And that's really highly efficient. But if you're an autonomous vehicle, as these are, you don't have a problem with changing lanes. You're on it. So that's your x-axis. What's inside? That's a container. And when I say a container, I mean a pallet-sized container, just slightly narrower than the open doors of a light rail vehicle, which is, as you know, ADA requires it 48 inches. It's consistent. And you have a lot of depth. So you can put an entire container, and it's going to be rather tall because you have a lot of room. It could be as tall as a person going in. And that is really exciting to me because I think of all those packages in the container, that's a whole lot of packages. And if you think that you and your buddy go in and you sit down on the light rail, think of how much space you're taking up. It's about the same size as a pallet, and you're paying $5, right? $2.50 a piece. So what are the packages? Think of those packages, 50, 100 of them. How much does it cost to move packages throughout the entire light rail system? If you were to mail something from one end to the other, all around, it's a lot of money. So let me show you a little bit more about how it works. And the train comes in. There are lights, red lights to say, stay out of this door, because that's going to be used for moving goods. There's a green light to say, okay, good to go, right? There's one other thing I wanted to tell you is that because these are autonomous vehicles and survey instruments, they know in advance when the train is coming because there's an internet system, an Internet of Things, where vehicles talk to each other and this entire system talks to each other. And because of that, it knows when the train's leaving, it knows where the doors are going to be, and it positions itself moving slowly on the rail. And so if you think about it, it doesn't have to go very fast. It doesn't even have to go walking distance, kind of like a moonwalk, just really slow. So that's a safety factor. People can feel comfortable around these vehicles. The door is open, and that process, as you saw, is this, setting it down, it locks in place. Seconds. It doesn't even disrupt the system. And before the train takes off, I want to point out where the green is, the door there. There's 25 seats so there without people standing up in the aisles. And so there's places for people to go. So here we have now the middle miles being handled by transit. Instead of a road, we've got a light rail line with stations along the way, moving packages throughout that system. The containers are available for cargo bikes to move throughout the city, carrying e-commerce or high-value products coming from the Red Line, the airport. And if you have a lot of containers, you got a flatbed truck, and we're making it electric. If you look at this picture now, the entire system is electric. We can do without the trucks. Carbon negative, fewer trucks, fewer cars, less congestion. Advantage number one. The planet is crying for this. And here's all those packages. And as I told you, we have a lot of packages in this full pallet-sized container, but many of them, the train that came by, that was just one car out of the train. And in Portland, we have 2 cars per train. In Seattle, they have 3. So if you think of just 6 doors, think of 12 doors. How much stuff can move? We're talking about millions of tons in a huge revenue source. I mean, I overheard TriMet talking about revenue, and everybody's concerned about that, of course. But we have now a new way of doing things. And light rail has lots of space most of the day and of course at night. This system does not even compete with passengers. I want to show you where there is density here at Metro Rail, Washington, D.C. If you were hiking that up, you'd call that a precipitous, you would not go on that hike. It's a precipitous rise and drop. In those two spaces are the morning 2 hours or so and the evening 2 hours or so peak, but everything else is a candidate for moving a lot of goods. And it changes now to utilize capacity. And there's more. New markets are created. Transit delivery would boost the last mile delivery. So we're going to steal from Beeline here. This is on their website. And you can see the shaded area here. This is their market from the west side of Portland all the way out to Mount Tabor. And you can see there's a lot of areas. I'm in Milwaukee, you know, you may live in some of these other areas. And so those markets are lost for two reasons. One is distance, because it takes time for the bike to get there. They have to be a certain distance from their center, which in this case is the reds. Red? Singular. Singular. The red. And so there needs to be more hubs. And we can provide that, surprisingly, with light rail. But the other thing is, look at this. There's the hill barrier, really steep, really hard for those bikes to get up those hills. And that too can be covered with a new system. We're ready for this. I mean, we're still dealing with old technology with trucks, and we have this new technology we can tap into. And so we talked about revenue, but this is the other side that's pretty fascinating. Delivery would be less expensive than middle mile truck-based delivery. And this is physics, so you can't argue with it. Steel wheels on steel tracks have a coefficient of friction 1/20th that of a truck. And the internal combustion engine, 80% of the energy that created is wasted. It doesn't go to the drivetrain. It's not that efficient, not compared to electric motors. So a pallet can move for pennies. And if you think how many packages, do some math here, that means a single package can move for a fraction of a penny. That is amazing. So we have high revenue and low cost in moving things. We have the future here using light rail in a different way than is ever done before. And this is the very first time that this idea has been presented anywhere. And I'm really glad that it's Portland and this state. Mass transit can be the middle mile alternative. And it's relevant because of the planet, environmental reasons. It's relevant because of the financial benefits that we talked about. And looking at that, there's some people that would say, well, I think we should lower taxes with that. And other people say, well, maybe we ought to lower the fares. And other people would say, well, let's expand light rail to new areas and increase the frequency of service. So that, and then other people are going to say, well, what about bikes? We ought to increase bikes and bike lanes and improve that and get much more of infrastructure developed. And I'm saying, okay, other people can decide that. I just want to say there's revenue that's coming in that never came in before. And right now, we have these technological advances bringing us into the future, and we can do this. It leverages current infrastructure. There's very little that has to happen to light rail to make this happen. There's lights on the bus. There isn't much more. You might have an automated system that costs, I think, $100 or something to tell the train it should stop at the same spot every time. Otherwise, you have the driver doing that. Not a lot of changes to the system, but you have a very expensive system that's already built. You have the rails, you have the trains, you have the drivers, you have the infrastructure. We're just using it better. Thank you. So I'm supposed to tell everybody that I have a booth and it's a long hike. So we're promoting pedestrian activity here. And so it's at the other end down the floor, if you haven't been there yet. It's a beautiful booth. And Eric Miller is at the back there, and he was a big part of that. And thank you to him. So the other thing is that people might be wondering, what about buses? Well, there's more. And I didn't want to include it in this because I wanted to make it 20 minutes. And I don't know where I'm at with that, but thank you.
You want to take any questions specifically?
Oh, yeah. We were going to do all the questions at the end, but maybe if there's anything that you didn't get in this, that we could take a few questions. Yeah.
Combining passenger traffic with moving goods. So there will be the public on these trains alongside of the goods.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be some separation with the lighting, and you could do like some sort of a barrier.
Right. So 2 follow-up questions. Are you not then just shifting congestion from one mode of transportation to another? And then my second question is, how do you ensure the safety that there's nothing stolen?
So I'm not sure I'm gathering the one type of congestion. You mean congestion?
Well, I would imagine that then you've got, you're taking up space from public transit users. So for those people who use public transit, that system is going to be more congested.
So just to clarify, and I guess I didn't do that, is that I'm not presuming that all those doors would be lit up in red. So the system would look at the transit use and see what the level is and would adjust accordingly. So that, if you're in the peak time, you might not have anything that's being moved, or you might have one door. But I'll tell you right now, transit is really, really low. And so there's actually a lot of space. And it starts, if you go and look at the stations, there's not that many people. So if there's 25 people there, there's room in the front. But the answer is the system would adjust accordingly. And there was the other part of that.
I'm just wondering how you keep the goods safe. If you've got not everybody is a perfectly upright citizen, right?
Oh yeah, we know that, right? So it's in a metal container, secured, and it would be, I don't know if you caught that. I think I showed in there, didn't say it, but Beeline's vehicles, those bikes can move 600 pounds. So these are not things that you can kind of mess with too much. But the other thing about that is because they're autonomous vehicles, inherently, they have a whole lot of sensors and maybe like heat sensors and cameras and everything. So it's kind of its own security system in a way. So, and you could program it to, tell people to back off if they hang around too long, and say, you know, we're notifying the police if someone's, you know, trying to hammer it or something.
How do you, I mean, you got a TriMet, a dual car max outfit. You've got people scattered from one end to the other. How are you gonna let them out when they want to go out, or let them know which way to go in and all that kind of stuff? And it sounds like kind of crazy logistics.
Well, they would be, you know, say in the front of the train. So they would be coming in and going out at the same place. And then you're going to see, you know, especially at night, because I'm sure it'd be lit up, but you're going to see these vehicles.
So you're going to limit where they can go on the train until that section fills up, and then open another door and that section fills up or something? Because otherwise you're going to be scattered all the way through the train. And
well, you know, there would be an analysis to know, you know, at this time, we normally get a range of 40 to 60 people. And so if that's the case, how many doors should be appropriated? And the other thing is, if the system gets it wrong, there's this intelligence with these autonomous vehicles that can read the area. They can offload themselves like, oh, I was going to load, but I see there's a lot of people here. I'll hold off and wait till the next train. Their packages are real patient.
I'm just wondering if you have had this conversation with TriMet, and if so, what they think. I don't know if anyone from TriMet is in the room, but what is the transit?
Yes, I have Tom Marcraft a long time ago, but that was, this whole thing that you're seeing here was from November. I've been working on this for about 8 years, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. And it wasn't until November that I thought, oh, before I was autonomous vehicles just getting on, boarding the train. And then it came to something different with this rail system. So this newest part, November, I've been working my website, getting ready for these conferences. I've tried to reach out to people, but right now it's kind of hard. And I've been real busy. So this was my reach out here, but Jarrett Walker, who is from Portland and is a transit consultant around the world and really highly respected and well known. He's got Human Transit, the book, and Human Transit is his blog. And I hired him as a consultant several times to get his input. And I contacted him about the newest idea, and he kind of said, well, you know, we're kind of busy, and why don't you just kind of take what I told you from before is my advice.
You haven't had like in-depth conversations with TriMet yet?
I would love to. Anybody here from TriMet?
Tara was it seems like, I love the concept. It seems like the ability to be able to tweak and change as ridership changes is probably key, right? Like tweaking as we get back to pre-pandemic ridership levels. And then hopefully if we achieve all of our goals, we go way beyond that and there'll be more people in transit. So trying to figure out like what happens then. And maybe it provides enough revenue to be able to expand rail and other.
That's the thing, is you're getting so much revenue that you can expand to new areas and you can do more frequent service because the train's full now. It's bringing in, it's like an airplane, you know, they're going to bring in a new airplane when that one's full, right? And so this one's full with both people and packages. We have a lot of income. It's much easier to have more frequency, more people come, packages, you know, and it just balances itself out. And you're going to, you know, any system like this, and I hope it happens here with the MAX line, you know, you're going to have the transit agency, TriMet, make those calls as to what is going to be tolerable. So I'm sure it's going to lean towards being sure that people can board. Yeah. So let's probably we save them. We're going to do a few questions. Let Franklin
switch it over. Right. As we're setting up here, thank you, Eric. I think it's really cool.
to be able to kind of consider what the future may hold and all these different modalities and how they connect to not only what is current, but what is potentially possible into tomorrow's. So as we shift over into Beeline Urban Delivery, I'll give you a little bit of introduction to myself and my company, and kind of look at not only what we're doing right here in Portland and have been doing for quite a while, but I was also asked to kind of share some of my insights of what I am seeing out of Europe. I was recently in Amsterdam at the International Cargo Bike Festival and interacting with a number of folks who are working very on the European front lines, not only in policy and regulation, but also in manufacturing design for cargo trikes and bicycles. So kind of sharing some of those takeaways. So let me see here. Beeline Urban Delivery. I'm Franklin Jones. I'm a he, go by he, him pronouns. And our mission is to make communities more livable for all. We are, and I'll come back to being a certified B Corporation. Before I launch into kind of the whole story, I'm really pretty excited to be presenting because Karen Swirsky was one of my, she was my first real boss, as they say, back in the day when I came out of college and started working for David Evans and Associates in bicycle and pedestrian planning. So a major seed of what has now happened almost 30 years ago, I can thank Karen. So thank you, Karen. I'll start off with that.
You can blame me.
I can blame you. So I'm going to whip through a number of slides. A lot of this for this audience is not going to necessarily be new, but I also think it's important to kind of keep reiterating the challenges that we face. Traffic in our cities. This is a challenge. We found a brief moment during the pandemic where we didn't have as much, and now we're seeing it come back. Decreases livability, adds to environmental injustice, and accelerates climate change. As we saw with Eric's presentation as well, there is a skyrocketing demand for e-commerce and local logistics and last mile logistics. And that demand is outpacing the ability to keep up with it. In fact, it's getting worse. So this is the World Economic Forum, and this is a 2030 base case scenario where we're seeing the rise of delivery vehicles, emissions, and congestion. And so as we go through this, you're looking at a 36% climb in deliveries, millions of tons of emission continuing, and the congestion and time of commute also increasing. And what's interesting about the congestion and time of commute is if all of these vehicles were replaced by electric vans, you would still have the congestion issue. So I think that's a really important distinction between some of the solutions that we bring to the table and also integrating with electric vans. So what we're looking at is continuing to develop our model, which is accessible, efficient, sustainable, and inclusive. How many folks are from Portland in the room? And how many folks have seen our trikes on the road? Awesome. So that's because we've been at it for a while. So I founded the company in 2009 with a kind of a social entrepreneurial mission to create a more livable community, primarily through the lens of transit and transportation and freight movement, but also through the lens of local food economies. Between 2010 and 16, we kind of established ourselves as pretty much one of the leaders in North America. We've been doing it longer than almost any other cargo bike or cargo freight company in North America, and continue to have some of the largest vehicles doing the most amount of work. In 2017 to 2022, it's been our kind of mid-growth years. We moved into an urban consolidation hub called the Red on Salmon Street, where we focus on providing kind of a shared space for regional food economy, as well as lots of last mile logistics. And what we're looking at now is taking these models into micro hubs, what I would call a neighborhood or community hub, and expanding the model not only in Portland area in Oregon, but throughout the West Coast and beyond. One of the things that grounds us in our growth is the fact that we are a certified B Corporation. And we have been a certified B Corporation since 2010, which also places us at the beginning of the B Corp movement. And For those of you who may not be familiar with the B Corp movement, essentially it's a certification for triple bottom line businesses that are focusing on a broad stakeholder community and not necessarily just fiscal returns to the shareholders. So what that means for Beeline is that we are consistently looking at our decisions in terms of our fiscal responsibilities, our stakeholder of the environment, and our stakeholder as our community. And our community includes our employees, our customers, and the community at large. So we often get asked, where do we start? Why here? Why Portland? So a couple of things. We are only in Portland, Oregon. And this kind of lands us because it not only lands us in terms of the beauty of the space, but this particular slide also lands us in the urgency of why. Because those aren't clouds, that's smoke. And so we are currently experiencing this climate urgency that there needs to be rapid ideation, innovation, and design for. But we also landed here because of the history of cycling infrastructure. A lot of that, Karen was behind. And many of you in the room are behind. So thank you for that. After traveling all across the world, from Japan to Ireland on my bicycle, coming back to Portland, I could see the growth of infrastructure and how it would be good for the adoption of certain modes of freight movement. And now, and this picture was taken relatively recently, and what's really interesting is these 3 photos were taken from the exact same spot. So it really shows this interconnectedness that Portland has provided the cycling world, and not only just for recreation, but for utility. So we've got dedicated lanes, we've got two cycle, actually 3 if you consider the Tillicum, cycle ped bridges, and we've got a growing e-bike share world. So a little bit more about Beeline itself. We are landed and headquartered at the Red on Salmon Street. It's an urban campus that really focuses on the growth of an equitable local food economy. We are in the building that says you're a part of it, and that's what you're looking there is essentially our warehouse, and that is those are solar panels on top as well. So when you see our bikes rolling around, you can say, wow, that's actually powered by solar energy as well, which is a really fun tool. This is kind of a sneak peek inside the warehouse. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the warehousing side, but essentially our model is a shared but managed almost public warehouse where we can provide a la carte services to a number of different providers and thereby reducing the barriers to entry that many small entrepreneurs and vendors have in gaining access to not only home delivery, but grocery and retail delivery markets. It's also where we run all of our trikes out of and all of our logistics. That big white box behind door number 3, that's a 2,000 square foot cold storage unit as well. So really a lot of integrated parts already happening. But of course, our focus is on the last mile. And you see here kind of the breadth of the types of products and customers that we serve. Anywhere from produce going, this is actually a very interesting slide because there's a couple of things going on here. One, we have produce going into restaurants. That's kind of our daily ballast of the trikes. Thousands and thousands of pounds going into restaurants from the largest organics purveyor in the Northwest. We drop at, say, Indiana downtown. We turn around, we go over to Whole Foods in the Pearl District. From Whole Foods, we actually load up produce that is no longer suitable for sale. We rescue that produce from going into the landfill, which is an environmental plus, and we redistribute it to places like Blanchet House, Sisters of the Road, when they were up and running, a number of different agencies that are working on the front line with houseless and homeless. That's called our B-Share program, and we build this into the logistics of the whole program. We're there, why not? Then, of course, we're delivering Grand Central Bakery bread. In this case, it's also a backhaul. So we've delivered a number of restaurants. We go to their bakery, we pick up, and we deliver back through a number of restaurants before it comes back to the depot. And then Office Depot, Office Max. delivering thousands of packages primarily into the city of Portland and PSU regions. One of the ways that we have made it work over the years is that we really focus on being able to service multiple industries and multiple categories. So historically, if I'm a FedEx or a UPS, I am really focused on moving parcels. And I may move parcels to businesses or parcels to home, but I'm not going to move fresh produce. If I'm a fresh produce company, no way am I taking, fresh baguettes. Those things don't really work. They don't match in the typical distributive properties that we're using right now in our freight and movement of goods. Beeline kind of puts it all together. We go to B2B, B2C, direct to consumer, and we're servicing multiple clients and multiple industries, often in the same route. So as I was mentioning for the Grand Central, we'll leave our hub and we'll go and we will drop 3 or 4 restaurants of produce, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up bread, deliver 4 or 5 different restaurants. At the end of that restaurant round, we might actually pick up recycling. We might pick up, styrofoam or those PTAP lids or clear film, and we'll actually bring it back to our hub and then move that on to an appropriate processor. So they're very, in the world of transportation, which you guys are very familiar with, you all are very familiar with, we have very, very little deadheading. Almost every trip is full. That allows us also to increase a very, very broad customer index, but primarily it's local. 75% of our clients are local. Only 6% of them are on the national level. We service many women-owned businesses, BIPOC businesses, a lot of growers and farmers and fisher folk, all part of our overarching mission. And what that means is we get to saturate the city. And so this is a heat map over about a week's worth of trips. Right? And this was also pre-pandemic, this particular photo. Now we've shifted more to the east side into the neighborhoods, but you can kind of see what happens when you end up saturating. And when you end up saturating, that also creates a third revenue system for us, because we use the trikes as an opportunity for mobile advertising for our partners. Oops. So what does that mean? Just a snapshot of our impacts over the years. Almost 150,000 deliveries. Getting up close to 81,000 meals being provided, and all sorts of really fun impacts. And that's essentially just looking at kind of the concentric components of what tricycles do within kind of our urban area. We're not the only ones. North America has a growing network of cargo bike and cargo trike delivery companies. Things to keep your eye on to watch for. Major carrier pilots, Amazon Fresh, especially in New York. Actually, right now, New York City and Manhattan is a very, very high growth hotspot for cargo bike logistics. FedEx Ground Coaster Cycles is an American-made manufacturing coming out of Montana, producing some really good vehicles. Up further north, we've got Canada Post and Purolator doing a lot of good work. Reef was working with Ghost Kitchens for a while. Some really interesting deployment opportunities. Then there are other small to mid-sized niche companies, kind of like Beeline. Shift Cargo's up in BC. There's a company out of Montreal, Revolution X in New York City. These folks have been around a while. They're also starting to grow and gain traction. And then interesting, the mobility, this micro-mobility sector is really also starting to connect and play within kind of this last mile component. It's not like they're taking products, but they create an opportunity for us to help support the micro-mobility. So for example, right now we've got 2 trikes, 60 batteries rolling around, swapping batteries all day long. So that the scooters and the bike shares, et cetera, can stay in market without having to place an F-250 truck in to come and swap them out. which I think is really ironic. So kind of linking ideas. But even more exciting, let's move on to the really fun stuff. In Europe, there's actually an industry. It's called cyclogistics. It's in the UK and Europe. And these are what I'm going to call 5 pillars or trends or moments that are coming together to create this explosion. Some of these are they're not going to be new to you. So I'm going to whip through them. The built environment in Europe is just different. We have smaller cities, small cities, dense neighborhoods, big cities, dense neighborhoods, pre-war, post-war. All of that is moving either from historic or public decisions along the way into denser neighborhoods that are not car-centric. And the cycling culture. And this is not cycling like let's go out and ride a bike for recreation. This is utilitarian cycling culture. This is in Amsterdam in November. That's the central bike station in Amsterdam. And then about 2 weeks after I left, they opened up the new central bike station in Amsterdam, which is underneath the Amstel. And it has room for 7,000 bikes. And it includes bike share, not really scooter share. They're not so big on the scooters. Bike share and cargo bike share. And I don't know how many stations to actually get your bikes fixed. So all sorts of things happening all at once. Google this, see the videos and walk through. It's phenomenal. Boy, let's have that go under the Willamette. That'd be great. Equally as exciting to the bicycling infrastructure that's being created in Europe is the kind of response by the cycling and the bike manufacturers. And you're also getting this kind of interest and shift from the automakers into specifically cargo bike manufacturing. And so cargo-centric manufacturers, you're getting everything from 2 wheels to 4, from no assist to what they call drive-by-wire. So essentially there's no mechanical connection between the power to the electric assist motor. So a couple of ones you may already know. This one up here, DHL running around I think it's in Amsterdam, and that is the Urban Arrow. That is the largest cargo bike company in the world. They're part of a larger bike company called Pono, and they're seeing skyrocketing demands just for cargo bikes. This one right here, these 4 are representative of the size and weight and movement capacity of our B-line trikes. And there's a lot of really cool things going on. Fulpra and cargo cycling, these are both kind of, they both kind of articulate. So you actually feel like you're riding a bike when you go around a corner and not like you're on a stationary bike rolling around, which is what happens on our bikes. There are massive technology leaps in the integration of batteries and swapping batteries. And of course, they're looking at ways to containerize and load systems a lot faster. This is a 4-wheel. This is called a SICK car, drive-by-wire, 4-wheel bicycle. This top comes off, gets kind of swapped very quickly. In the US, and particularly Oregon, 4-wheel vehicles are not considered bicycles, so this isn't an option to us currently, but it's amazing. Got to ride one in Amsterdam. They are super fun. This is the Ono. This is out of Berlin. This is arguably one of the most technical vehicles on the market right now. I believe it's also drive-by-wire. You can see it's detaching. So you've got preload capacities, all sorts of things. And then on the non-actual tricycle side of the world, but also super innovative and super simple, is that you have these flexi lift or bicycle, it's called bike lift or flexi lift. And essentially it's like a dolly that comes on and connects to a pallet. And then you can roll that pallet and hook it onto any bike and away you go. So you're actually seeing this combination of urban arrows and the pallet lift quite often.
Real quick question on this. Is that similar to the Carla Cargo? Does it actually have power in it as well?
Different manufacturers do it differently, but some manufacturers do have it in power, so you can detach it and then walk it and move it to where you need to go. You're seeing URBE, URBE, and Carla Cargo's also focusing on trailers that can be detached and moved into the spaces. Pretty much, it's mind-boggling how many different components are coming out. And except for the Urban Arrow, unfortunately, we don't have any of those available to us currently. And we can talk about why if you're interested. So other components. So we talked about the cycling manufacturer. The other component is the public sector initiative. The public sector is stepping up, leading the way. France has a nationwide cycle logistics plan. It's not just buried in their transportation freight plan. It is a standalone cycle logistics plan. And they're subsidizing every single piece of cargo that goes on a cargo bike. The state is subsidizing part of that cost. London followed suit. Like last month, they rolled out with their the London cycle logistics plan. Equally as aggressive, amazing cool work. And Berlin, they don't have the plan, but Berlin is arguably the spot in Europe right now for cargo bikes. They have massive cargo bike shares. They've got various different companies operating. And you can see that Ono here taking a loaded container off of a tram and loading it onto the Ono and going away. Not nearly as cool as what Tulip's going to have, because when you go to in the Tulip thing, you've got it all integrated. And this integration is also on the data side. There's tons of money and interest going into what the term is, the physical internet or the Internet of Things. And it's essentially, how do you package things from one component all the way to the end user and have it packaged and decoupled and packaged and decoupled until it reaches the home, instead of independent components all going different directions at different times. The technology, like Eric was referring to, the technology is there, the infrastructure is there. It's not going to take that much time to pull them together. That's partially because the private sector is leaning in some significant ways. And they're leaning in Europe, but it's going to start coming into the United States. We're already seeing it coming into Manhattan. Three really cool things going on. One, Zetify, which started about the same time as Beeline on a very similar platform, and in fact, the same tricycles that we use. They are the largest third-party provider, independent third-party provider in UK, and they've recently received over £5 million. So in the conversion, that's like $6 million. That's a major investment into cycle logistics. That's just one company. And that was led by Barclays. It wasn't a side thing. It was a major investment into one company doing cycle logistics in UK. And Antwerp, you're seeing 7 major brands, including Danone, which is the world's largest organic products maker. They're saying, hey, listen, why aren't our logistics combined? Why are we sending things independently? Let's bring it together. So they have collectively created this collaborative urban logistics and transport component, and it's industry-led to combine goods going into Antwerp. And then there's entrepreneurial efforts and shared efforts. Docker is kind of like Zipcar, all on trucks. And they market to companies. So you'll see FedEx branded Docker vehicles in Amsterdam, right? And you'll see just, somebody on their weekend getting a Docker bike and going to the store and grabbing whatever they need. So all sorts of kind of cross. And then of course that you have the mobility
the kind of the shared asset model, where not dissimilar to finding a bike share or a scooter. This is in Berlin again, Cargo-Roo. You can pull up your Cargo-Roo, find out where the shared cargo bikes are, go get a cargo bike, utilize it, drop it off, boom, 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 boom. And that's all an open source shared network. Cargo-Roo, really cool company if you want to check them out. So why now? What's happening in the US, kind of bringing it back home. I think the need is really urgent. The time really is now. We don't have to wait. And the opportunity is right there. 3 things that kind of support that. When we look, this is of Portland. This is in Portland. Trucking, and I'm going to put trucking in quotes because it's not all trucking. It's not just trucks. It's the movement of goods. And movement of goods can go from a big truck to, an Uber freight. It represents it's 5% of all traffic, but 24% of emissions. So it's disproportionately impacting our environment. Again, as Eric was pointing out, not in Portland, but when you look at EU, and particularly in France, they're looking at, the EU is right now saying 51% of all products can be moved on cargo bikes. France and Paris, they're saying upwards 75% of all goods can be moved by cargo bikes. Substantial different perspective here. And in the United States, when we look at it from a financial growth, you've got a 16% compound average growth rate of last mile delivery. And it's extremely fragmented. So those 2 things from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I look at those 2 things and I'm like, wow, there's a really strong market-based incentive to bring this together, but we can't do it alone. And so this quote from the managing director of Post and Parcel at Accenture, which is one of the big 5 kind of consulting companies, I think really kind of brings it home. You can't do it alone. You need public, you need private, you need entrepreneurial, you need policy. No single thing can come together. We have to build that ecosystem for it to be successful. And when it's success, you get back. And that's really fun. So I'll leave this up here and open up for some questions, and feel free to shoot questions to me or more questions to Eric. Yeah.
I guess the only question I had was kind of combining the 2 things is, like, if you have this kind of like system where it's autonomous and developing where it'll stop at, where it should take packages off, where it should put them on, how will Beeline be able to like staff those pickups if there's not like a set schedule of these packages? Like, they're going to be there at that time, that place.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we're looking at this concept of neighborhood hubs, and it's interesting because it actually corresponds to this discussion of mobility hubs as well. When I think about it, of a neighborhood hub, I kind of think of it as that concept of a third space. And there are multiple ways that could emerge. You can have a freight hub at a transit center that has an autonomous vehicle offloading from light rail and putting it into a locker. And it's all locked, it's all secured. And then you can have a trike come up, open the locker, actually not even have to unload it, just lift it up and away you go. You can also have a component of that locker that's open to consumers, and like an Amazon locker is now. And you're seeing this combination of accessible lockers and essentially pallet movement. You're seeing that in Europe currently. So this combination, and then what's really cool, if you think about the concept of a third space, you could also have a coffee shop there, right? You could have a bike shop, and you can have mechanics, and you can have job training, and you can land it in a neighborhood, and you can thereby reduce commuting, because now you don't have to go to work across the city. you can just go to work here and then work within the neighborhood that you know. And as you work within the neighborhood, you develop that fabric. You don't have to rely on, hey, which direction am I going on my phone? You're like, oh, I'm going to Susie's restaurant. I know Susie. And you roll over there and you high five and get a cup of coffee and you go about your day. I think that's really magical when you start thinking about the human component of this term micro hub. So, and it's, in my perspective, it's also a little weird because if you think about the components that were anchoring many of our communities for years that we all kind of interacted with, United States Postal Service and banks on Main Street, both are closing. Yeah, there's awesome opportunity to kind of re-engage what both stood for. Frankly, the U.S. Postal Service would just do all this anyway.
So, and I'd like to add to that too, that how I envision it is that this concept of transit-oriented development changes so you include delivery in that. So that means hubs, and that means storing things in different places that you wouldn't expect. So I think Portland is just such a great potential here with all of the bike paths. Like think of the I-5 bike path, and you have light rail at the Clackamas Town Center, things offloading there, and then bikes coming and distributing those, either taking it as a container or as a locker, where one side of it is just a locker and those get planted at perhaps every 0.2 of a mile, whatever, along the 205 bike path or I-5. Well, name them, and then you got I-84 and you've got all these bike paths. And so you could also have like a hub at the Clackamas Town Center and have a hub here, right? Because you've got plenty of parking and you could repurpose part of the Lloyd Center to develop a hub, and goods come in from the light rail right here.
Yeah.
Curious to hear a little bit more about Beeline's fleets.
Yeah.
Imagine 600 pounds on a cargo bike takes a toll on hub and spokes. So curious what the capabilities of your bikes are, what the price point is for them, and then what the turnover rate is for materials.
Yeah, so our trikes are really truly they're unlike anything in the United States or even in Europe. I say even in Europe because our current fleet is way more heavy duty than the majority of the European cargo bike manufacturers outside of Ona, Fulcra, Sitcar, and Cargo Cycling. We have a payload capacity of upwards about 600 pounds. We went through years of iteration to find out, guess what? Bicycle wheels, bicycle brakes, bicycle hubs, bicycle spokes, none of that works. Right? We just exploded them. Literally exploded the wheels. So this is what almost 15 years of operations experience gives you. So the essential kind of components, they're really more from almost a moped world that enables us to kind of carry those torques in that world. So they carry 600 pounds. They are all electric assisted. We still use lead acid batteries. We're carrying 80 to 160 pounds of battery weight. And the reason for that is because our motors through the controller need low energy. They need the torque. They don't need to spin high. So if we took a Bosch motor and put it on our bikes, we would blow up the Bosch motor system because they're meant to spin high. They're like Mazda-Miatas or something. Yeah. We're like a tugboat. And that kind of technology is still being developed. Now it's being developed more in Europe than it is in the United States. We also in Oregon are, depending on who you talk to, I'm going to say blessed with 1,000 watt motor output limit. That's a lot of wattage. Why watts are used as the governor of a bicycle, I have no idea. It makes no sense to me, but it is. So watts are the governor. To give you a sense, European is 250, and the rest of the United States is around 500. 500, 750, depending on, it's all state regulated too. And that's manufacturing. Europe is, we were talking about the classifications of cargo bikes and e-bikes in another session. Europe is developing another classification for heavy duty cargo bikes, which enables them to bring a higher watt motor that is strictly for torque and not for speed. And they govern it through the controllers in the system and not just kind of list watts. So there's things happening in Europe. If you want to kind of keep your pulse on it, the Dutch cycling industry, they are like right there. There's also a United Kingdom Cyclo-Logistics Federation and the EU Cyclo-Logistics Federation. And all of this has emerged in the last like 8 years. So it's really exploding, yeah.
Your batteries, what do you do with them? Do you recycle them? I mean, there's a whole mining issue with lithium batteries. And so like, I know you guys are triple bottom line. And so how are you thinking about that?
So in our current world, we use lead acid. And when we draw them down, they get to a point where they lose range too quickly for us. And so what we do is we give them back to our supplier, and they kind of do they essentially recycle the cells, and then they'll put them back into different use cases. So the life cycle of a lead acid battery is actually much longer than the life cycle of a lithium ion or the NiCad, except they're super, super heavy, right? So as technology moves and we go into this more of an advanced technology for batteries, that's going to be certainly something that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to and looking at life cycle analysis and whatnot. At the same point, there's going to be a trade-off someplace along the line.
Right, and technology will improve.
And technology, I mean, shoot, there was no battery on the market that we could ever think about even 5 years ago. And now there's, 3 or 4 very high quality batteries coming out of primarily Germany. And all UL certified. So like all the fire situations that you're hearing out of Brooklyn, there's solutions for that.
Because everybody uses the Bosch now, it's UL certified, and Bosch has now come out with some higher torque cargo bike oriented motors too. That are not, maybe not for the big bikes like units you got, but they're much more suited to the Cargaroo and the
that big urban aero that you saw, that's used in the new Bosch.
Yeah, I think that's something.
It's pretty strong.
Yeah.
Shane?
So, been in the industry since '94. Did a presentation similar to this in 98 about how cargo bikes were the future. Yeah. And like, why is now the time? Like this industry has been there in the shadows, and now like e-bikes have made cargo bikes even bigger than ever before. We had 5 Peddlers Expresses running across America at one point. But it never went anywhere, and then for a lot of different reasons, right? We're in a auto-dominated culture still, right? And that's this conference is about that change. But there's a dozen people in here. This should be 200 people. This is like a solution that is really can have a huge impact on our cities.
Massive.
But it's super niche, right? So like, how does something like this really become the answer, and how does it become something that you're presenting to 200 people?
Yeah, great. Great question. I like presenting to 200 people. That sounds fun. And the answer is both in both the challenges and in the opportunities. One of the things I think is coming together is certainly this focus on technology and the data components of how they can, the sensing, everything else that's coming together that will ultimately connect what a cargo trike does to the broader world of logistics, from first mile to middle mile to last mile. that ability to kind of connect around the physical internet is accelerating faster than we've really seen ever. And therefore, there's going to be a market demand. And that market demand from Amazon logistics, et cetera, is going to outpace policy, which is going to create a challenge in the United States especially. So I think that's part of it. You mentioned e-bikes. E-bikes outsold EVs for the last 3 years in the United States. Cargo bikes in Germany grew 63% in 1 year, cargo bike sales. So it's still niche in the United States, but the gap between niche to kind of pre-mainstream is really decreasing. Will it be mainstream in the United States? It's going to take a while. It's going to take quite a bit of time, partially because built environment, what's going to be the public sector initiative. Watch the news tomorrow, Wednesday, for some significant public sector initiatives from Portland. So that's really cool. Looking forward to seeing what that will bring to our city. So I think public sector initiative, private sector dollars, and technology are the three things that I think it's by now, right? Yeah. Marco?
What's your average distance for delivery?
Our average distance for delivery, right now we have about a 5 mile radius, which is really long. Why we want to put more hubs in. It's actually too long. So what our goal would be more like 1.5 miles, lots of urban density and connecting to the types of technology that Eric is bringing, not only on the FineMax, but with buses and connectivity. And, a given rider will take a route that is essentially, the lowest route's probably 4 miles, and the longest route in the day might be close to 30, because they're taking the long route around delivering at people's doorsteps. That takes a long time. So it's, this is all things that we're working on too. Again, data comes in, routing technologies. None of this exists by itself. You have all sorts of technology, data technologies, physical manufacturing that is coming together. Angry.
So I work with City of Portland, and we are looking at what we can do to promote more electric vehicle deliveries, generally e-cargo bike and smaller electric trucks. And we have a meeting coming up, so we'll dig into this further. But I think just kind of interested in hearing what you think is the biggest thing that the public sector could do to support this work. We come from a EPS, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, so it's really a zoning perspective, and we have been doing a lot of things to try to promote densification within the city. So I'm interested in generally public sector generally, but then also if you have ideas for zoning.
Yeah.
And we don't need to go into this super deep. But
I'll give you a really high level, and I'm also really interested what Eric would say with this. So I would say from a public sector, the investment in the infrastructure comes in to it as a key component, and zoning is major, the major piece. And when you look at zoning, really rethinking what is freight, right? What is freight and what is warehousing? Because we have pushed freight and warehousing out. And as we push freight and warehousing out, we could land it next to disenfranchised neighborhoods. The market actually wants to get product closer to their consumers. So they want to go, the market, meaning the folks with money, want to move it closer and in a smaller capacities so that you can store less but have a higher turn rate. That is a really good situation for thinking about our public infrastructure and where can we land micro hubs and micro distribution components, and how do we use that right of way?
We got lots of parking lots.
Here's a great example. The building where we sat in here, I walked through with the gentleman who's the head of the redevelopment of the Lloyd Center. And we said, great, let's get a temporary injunction to do a last mile freight hub right here. And you can't, this is not zoned for freight. So you can't do that. And imagine all of the parking underneath here being utilized for something, not forever, just in the temporary and as a pilot. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now. And I know you've got awesome ideas about utilization of public right of way too.
Yeah, and I advocate the changing the rules in a lot of ways. And I don't know how that's going to happen, but you know, as mentioned about the bike path along 205, and you know, as you may know, that the ODOTs or the DOTs in the world, they can't keep building out because the more they build out, the more expensive it gets. So the widening is happening less and less just by sheer costs, and the revenues are not there to do that. So we've got to do something different. But
all those bike paths.
Yeah, but along 205, I want you to imagine you've got a slope there. That could be a hub because it's access control, but a bike can go there and pick things up. That's a pretty radical idea, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Under bridges, another thing, you know, could be used.
I was going to share. I don't know if you were in the Bend mobility.
The flex.
So yeah, so the pilot project for Bend's first mobility hub is probably going to be a lease situation on a parking lot in a commercial zone because the city changed. They made the zoning more flexible.
Yeah.
But it's not that hard to do.
Planners are not.
However, I don't think that the code allows a micro freight facility.
Yeah,
so I got to look into that.
There is a definition. We get hung up on definitions.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you have to. You have to start with that.
And
yeah. But
it's interesting because from a public sector, we've got to start with these definitions. Putting my private sector hat on.
Yeah.
All guns blazing.
Yeah. Well, you know, those poor planners behind the counter have something to lean on.
That's true.
Just want to let you know we're at 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
Has safety been an issue for younger drivers? Have the issues?
So we've been operating for nearly 15 years. We've had 0 accidents involving the public, and the only accidents we've had within internally have all been manageable. Our bikes don't tip like this; they tip like this.
I was more worried about your driver. An incident with another vehicle on the road.
Yeah.
0. And that is because they're large, visible vehicles, and we spend a lot of time in training. Yeah, you can't just jump on those trucks. We spend a ton of time in training and safety. Does that mean we get a rider that goes out there and, you know, is listening to the birds chirp or something and might roll through a stop sign? Or yeah, it's human.
I was more worried about the other drivers.
Yeah, we've had
drivers.
No, the accidents that involve other vehicles, it's like when we might take out somebody's mirror because we cut a corner too fast or too close. But from a cost standpoint, we also have a truck in the system. The truck, accidents, maintenance, everything, so much more expensive to operate. So we actually have these comparisons, and it's so much more expensive to operate. It can also carry a lot more goods. So from a revenue perspective, it's an essential tool. So a lot of what we're talking about is like essentially the right sizing of the tools within the whole system. Just having Cyclogistics as a last mile as kind of, or final mile, isn't the only solution. Looking forward to connecting to light rail and transit and an integrated ecosystem, that's going to make massive difference.
I know we're going over time here, but I want to throw out, because I was in the DOT, the Oregon DOT, you know, we're always concerned about the road, the weight of the vehicle tears apart the roads. Now, some of the vehicles are more vans, but there's a lot of weight. You can tell they've got 2 tires in the back. Those delivery vehicles are really wearing down our roads, and that is a big expense. It's another one of those hidden expenses that's externalized, and that I hope people would be more aware of that.
Yeah. I know there's a couple other people with questions. Feel free to come up to me afterwards, or to Eric as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Maybe there's one place to have a meeting. I'm not really sure.
Steve will jack at 6:30.
All right. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, Karen, so
really
great.
interesting, fascinating. Yes, awesome.
Great.
Yeah, great stuff you went to.
I did.